Hey, everybody, welcome. Um, give everyone a minute to show up and before we get going. Hey, Vince. Okay, let's get going. Welcome. I'm Larry Harnish. This is Boxy. Boxy is the Los Angeles County District Attorney's files in the Black Dahlia case. Aren't you, Boxy? Uh-huh. Now, I do the Ask Me Anything. Hey, Joyce. I do the Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case first Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And in case you're new, I started doing the Ask Me Anythings because I got tired of the low quality of true crime shows and podcasts. I just won't do them anymore. I am sick of the true crime industrial complex. I've had it. Hey, Boris. Um, so this is only Black Dahlia questions. I do another Ask Me Anything the third Tuesday of the month. That's for all the George Hodel and Steve Hodel stuff because I don't want to clutter up this one with all that nonsense. So today, only Dahlia questions, no George Hodel questions. And the plan is that I will alternate between live questions and submitted questions. I'll talk for about an hour and the time should go quickly. Instagram, I learned, cuts off at an hour. It will not save a recording that's over an hour. So I for sure will be cutting it off before then. The next session on the Dahlia will be January 2nd, 2024, Pacific time on YouTube and Instagram. Okay, first thing, report on the book. As of Friday, I was at 135,000 words. Yes, I have pretty much finished part one. That is the life of Elizabeth Short as much as we can know about it and say with any hope of accuracy. Right now, I'm sort of in the transitional period where I'm talking about the Biltmore Hotel after Red Manley has left Elizabeth Short there on the evening of January 9th. I'm going to look at the lost week. I have to figure out how I want to treat that. And I want to point out something because we'll get into it today. The people who insist the most adamantly that they know where Elizabeth Short went after she left the Biltmore, the more adamant they are, the more insistent they are, the less trustworthy they are. You have here in LA, we have the death tourism industry, and they will tell you, well, Elizabeth Short went to this certain club, and it's like there's really not a lot of basis for that. And of course, retired Detective 3 Steve Hodel will tell you there was no lost week. It was all made up by the newspapers, and he has gone through all the old newspaper coverage and says, see, she was seen here, she was seen here, uh, under the incredible assumption that detectives in the 1940s didn't read the newspaper. Okay, enough about that. Um, One thing I want to talk about that's kind of an interesting phenomenon that's new. Everybody's talking about AI, artificial intelligence. And yes, it is intruding into true crime. I have seen in the last couple of weeks a number of what appear to be AI generated videos. They're short on the Black Dahlia case. The images appear to be scraped from the internet. The text, there is loaded with misspellings, and the voice seems to be um, synthetic. So that is an interesting trend, and it's not good because what AI does is it scrapes the internet, so it's just a big echo chamber. Anyway, that's something to be that I have noticed quite recently. Okay, before I open up to questions, I want to talk about Janice Knowlton, and I want to talk about Daddy was the Black Dahlia killer. I'm going to talk more about Janice Knowlton than about the book. Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer was written by Janice Knowlton and Michael Newton. Hey, Febke. Michael Newton is an established crime writer. He's got a number of books to his credit. They're all paperback. I don't think he's got any hardbacks. I think he's done a lot of paperbacks on true crime over the years. And I do not know how he and Janice Knowlton hooked up. And I haven't. Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer it's one of those books that I won't let in the house. Severed, John Gilmore's Severed used to be like that, where it had to stay in the garage. I wouldn't let it into the house. But I finally broke down and said, okay, I'll bring it into the house. But Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer. I don't own a copy. I refuse to own a copy of that book. And it's really two books. You have Michael Newton trying to write about the Black Dahlia case, and then you've got Janice Knowlton talking about her dad and all this crazy stuff. Okay. Michael Newton has got Michael Newton says a couple of interesting things. One of them is that the medical exam, the inquest, the medical report on Elizabeth Short is sealed at the LAPD's request. Now, I have heard various stories about that. I've heard that it's missing, and I've heard that it's sealed at the LAPD's request. The Los Angeles Times reported most recently that the LAPD has requested that the file be sealed for whatever reason. And so what Michael Newton has in the book is, if I remember correctly, he had a contact in the sheriff's department, and his contact in the sheriff department got a copy of the report and hand copied it and then transcribed it. I'm a little leery of that. There are things in there that aren't anywhere else for complicated reasons. Very simply, there are three copies of the inquest. There's three copies of the medical report. There's one that was read into the record at the coroner's inquest. Okay, but it's incomplete. Why is it incomplete? Frederick Newbar, the medical examiner, was reading his entire report into the record. And the inquest is like a little trial. And it's presided over by, in this case, the deputy coroner. There's a little jury that says, yeah, this is a suspicious death, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the deputy coroner, who is like presiding over the inquest, says, Doc, this is really long. Can you just say why she died? And so Newbar then skips a bunch of stuff and said, yeah, here's why she died. So there are things missing from what was read into the record at the inquest. There's an LAPD summary that fills in some of that. It also has a version. And then Newton has got a third version, and none of them agree word for word. They're similar. But I'm leery of it because for one specific, first of all, maybe his story about getting it from somebody in the sheriff's department is legit, maybe not. I don't know. But at one point he'll say, yeah, well, Elizabeth Short had grass in her vagina and the medical examiner missed it. And it's like, what? No. So, I mean, I have a very low threshold for that kind of thing. It's like, okay, I'm just not going to, no, I don't. So I have a copy of it. I've compared it to the other versions. There's stuff in there that isn't anywhere else. Maybe it's authentic, maybe not. I don't know. But I want to talk more about Janice Knowlton. And wow, my experiences with Janice. And we're going to get into it. It just shows you how inbred the Black Dahlia world used to be. Okay. I heard this story from Jackie Daniel. Okay. Who's Jackie Daniel? Well, Jackie Daniel is the daughter of Paul DeRiver. And who is Paul DeRiver? Paul DeRiver was the disgraced, troubled, what have you, police psychiatrist in the LAPD. He was the man behind the Leslie Dillon debacle. Okay, that's Paul DeRiver. Jackie Daniel was his daughter. She was his secretary. And I met her because I was in the district attorney's office looking at old files, and Jackie Daniel came in to go through Boxy, their version of Boxy. This is a Boxy clone. She was going through the real one. And Daniel told me this story. Jackie Daniel was Paul Driver, her dad's secretary. Okay, fine. And then she went into publicity. She was doing PR in Orange County. Okay, so Janice Knowlton, and I'm skipping a lot of the life of Janice Knowlton because, you know, to make the story somewhat manageable and short. Anyway, Janice Knowlton was a vocalist. She was a singer. She used to sing at Disneyland. And apparently, according to Jackie Daniel, because I heard the story from Jackie Daniel, had a pretty good voice. But Janice was working in publicity. And since they were both working in PR, Jackie Daniel got to know Janice Knowlton. And presumably at some point, Jackie Daniel told Janice Knowlton her story about the Black Dahlia. And Janice Knowlton just went off the deep end. This was in an era, if you remember the era of recovered memories, remember that? Okay. Janice Knowlton had all these recovered memories that her dad killed Elizabeth Short, and she actually persuaded, I think it was the Westminster Police Department, to go dig up a vacant lot because she thought something was there. Well, no, nothing was there. And when I interviewed Brian Carr, the LAPD detective who was then in charge of the Black Dahlia case, the one thing he said was, "Don't give any ink to Janice Knowlton. She's goofy." So that was the LAPD's position on Janice Knowlton. Anyway, when I did the story for the 50th anniversary of the Black Dahlia case, I started hearing from Janice Knowlton, and she would leave long, rambling messages on my voicemail. And I discovered that the LA Times voicemail ran out at 2 minutes because she would talk for the entire 2 minutes. So and I would hear from her when anything was published about the Black Dahlia case, or when a famous celebrity of the golden age died, because as soon as a famous celebrity from the golden age died, she would add them to the list of guys who molested her. That her dad, also arranged for trysts with, like, Gene Autry, whoever famous of that era who died, she would add that to the list. And it was just a regular thing. She would do that. So in 2003, Steve Hodel publishes Black Dahlia Avenger. Okay. And I started waiting. It's like, where's my call from Janice? Where's Janice Knowlton? I haven't heard from her. What's the deal? And, I think about it, and then it's like, no, I haven't heard from her. Okay. And then one night I was at work. I was like, well, let me just Google Janice Knowlton to see what's going on. Well, she was dead. And it's like, oh, wow. I had no idea. I wondered why she was so quiet. It was easy to make fun of Janice Knowlton until I found out that she killed herself. I emailed Michael Newton and I said, hey, is Janice Knowlton really dead? And he said, yeah, not only is she dead, but her family wants her share of the royalties on Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer. It's like, oh, okay. And the internet post that I read, or the stuff that I read on the internet, was posted by her sister, who apparently had gotten a hold of Janice Knowlton's computer and decided that it was all for real, and their dad really did kill the Black Dahlia. It's like, oh my God, it's spreading. Anyway, this was about, gosh, it was like 7 months later. So I called the Orange County coroner and I said, hi, can I check on Janice Knowlton? Is she really dead? Yeah, she's really dead. And it was a suicide. So at that point, I contacted our obits department and I said, hey, I realize we don't do obits. It was like something like 7 months after the fact, but she was pretty noteworthy and she is dead. It's like, so they did an obit. Anyway, to answer one of the questions, which was interesting, kind of on the same wavelength. Yes. At some point, who should get together but Tamar Hodel and Janice Knowlton? It's like, oh my gosh, because Janice was just wild. She was just batshit crazy. And Tamar is no prize. And so the two of them getting together is just, oh my gosh. But anyway, so yeah, the first published thing in like since the 40s or maybe 1950 with George Hodell's trial, linking George Hodell to the Black Dahlia, was on one of the, if you remember the old Usenets, it was like alt crime or something like that, where Janice Knowlton posted something about, hey, what about this George Hodell guy and the Black Dahlia? It's like, oh wow. So anyway, that was Janice Knowlton and Tamar Hodell getting together. And Elena, I'm segueing into one of the questions here. I read that Janice Knowlton was contacted by Tamar Hodell after publishing a book. Yes, that's true. Janice Knowlton referenced George Hodell in her story. I don't know if it's in the book. She did say something in the on one of these Usenets many years ago. Yeah, is it possible that Janice Knowlton, who moved from Lynn, Massachusetts to California identified her memoirs about Elizabeth Short? I don't know. For all I know, Janice Knowlton got it from Jackie Daniel. And why did Michael Newton collaborate with Janice? Gave him a chance to write about the Black Dahlia case. I mean, Michael Newton is an established true crime writer. He's done a number of books. He did one about the it was the crime that was it was the basis of the movie Changeling. He did a book about that. He's done a couple, and so that's. Oh, okay. Well, welcome to getting harassed here. Pardon me, welcome to getting banned here. Where are you? Okay. Let's see. What am I going to do with you here? Oopsie. Okay. You just got reported. Goodbye. Okay. I was waiting for SR to show up. SR showed up. SR got reported. Okay, we're done. Let's see. Where was I here? So that's kind of that's kind of the that is kind of the Janice Knowlton story. As I said, it was a lot easier to make fun of her when she was still alive. And she shows up in James Ellroy's My Dark Places. He calls her the Black Dahlia lady. Oh yeah. Michael Newton wrote a bunch of books. As I said, I've never met the man, but he's an established writer of crime books. And why they collaborated, it gave him a chance to write about the Black Dahlia case, and that's probably it. Okay. So with that, let's have some questions. Or I can, since I've got it on, since I have the chat on so slow here, let me do one of the submitted ones. Happens to be from Andre. Andre had some questions last week about, or last time about the drugstore. So let me kind of wrap up the drugstore. The drugstore was a pharmacy. It had a lunch counter. It sold various kinds of knickknacks, cold remedies, Pepto-Bismol, aspirin, toiletries, combs, razors, hairspray, all that kind of stuff. Do I know who gave Elizabeth Short? And Elizabeth Short got her nickname, the Black Dahlia, in this drugstore in Long Beach. That's where she got it. It was kind of an in joke in this drugstore, Arnold Lander's drugstore in Long Beach. One of the people there gave her the nickname, and again, it was kind of a joke. The actual person's name, I have no idea. I don't think anybody knows that. Is it known how the press found out about the drugstore? That came from a couple of places simultaneously. Aggie Underwood got it from the Long Beach police. Jack Smith called the drugstore and got the information. Jack Smith was a rewrite guy for the Daily News. So the press kind of all got it the same day. Now, I should point out, because this is what's important, the newspapers often nicknamed murder cases in the 1940s, and mainly for the Herald Express, which was the afternoon paper. And this continued all the way up to the Hillside Strangler and the Night Stalker. Those are all from the Herald. Okay. The Herald also attempted to nickname the Black Dahlia case. They thought it was the werewolf murder. And so when you look at the early stories in the Herald, you'll see that they call it the werewolf murder. And they insisted on calling it the werewolf murder for a couple of days until they realized Black Dahlia is a lot better. And so that's what happened. Deranged crime, it could be. There's an interview with Aggie Underwood out at Cal State Northridge. And I think in that taped interview, she says it was from the cops in Long Beach. It's been, I listened to those tapes in like 97, so I don't remember now, but I think that's what she said. Okay. Gene, what do I feel is the best source for accurate Black Dahlia information, at least until the book is published? Gene, I always say the original news stories from 1947 is the way to go. Don't read any of the books. You'll have to unlearn everything. And the thing is, you don't know just how bad the books are. So I would say read the original news stories from like January of 1947 up to maybe March, because the story starts getting distorted. Reporters start writing off the top of their head rather than reading the clips. They based on what they remember, which isn't always accurate. So that's it. That's what I would recommend. Not the magazine articles. Don't go to the true crime articles, the true crime magazines and stuff like that, simply because those are what they call clip jobs, where a reporter or a writer sits down with a big envelope of clips and they put it into a story. I would not put any credence. I would stick strictly with the news stories. Okay. All right. Let's go to another submitted question here. Black Raven. Now this one came from Black Raven on YouTube, who had no posts and nothing. So it's like, okay, I've got a question for you the next time you do a Best Short Q&A. I'm interested in what direction she would have most likely taken from the Biltmore, and what eyewitness accounts would have been the most reliable given the circumstances. Would she have gone out on Olive overlooking Pershing Square, or was it possible to leave the Biltmore on South Grand Avenue? Given that she had friends toward North Hollywood, I would like to imagine she would have been looking for a way over to Santa Monica or Sunset Boulevard, but in what mode of transportation? Surely she could have hopped a streetcar, or like many women today, maybe she hoped to get a date or ride along Figueroa Street, perhaps first to Beverly. Now, you have to have some geographical knowledge of LA to understand that question. Okay. Where is the Biltmore Hotel situated? The Biltmore Hotel is in downtown Los Angeles. It is at 5th and Olive. It's on Olive between 5th and 6th. It has since been expanded, and it now takes up the whole block. It didn't originally. The Biltmore Hotel, by the way, was built in 1923 during Prohibition, so there was no bar. What is now the bar used to be like a vestibule or something like that. There was no bar because it was built during Prohibition. Anyway, Um, where she could have gone is that's one of the big mysteries of the Black Dahlia case. And again, the more adamant people are about I know where Elizabeth Short went, the more you have to be wary of them. Okay. Esoteric of the true crime, of the death tour industry will tell you she went to the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge. Okay. Why would they say that? Well, Boxy here has a lot of information on the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge, stuff that was never released under the FOIA. And they investigated to an unbelievable level the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge. And how was she linked to that? Well, okay, Anne Toth. Anne Toth was Elizabeth Short's roommate at Mark Hansen's house in Hollywood. Anne Toth used to meet her boyfriend, Leo, at the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge because he was in the hat business and his offices were right there. So they would meet at the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge. And you have to know what sort of person Elizabeth Short was. Elizabeth Short was a sponge. If you told her a story, this happened to me. I went to the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge, blah, blah, blah. Anne Toth would tell her a story. Elizabeth Short would repeat that story as if it happened to her. She did that habitually. And so she might have talked about the Crown Jewel Cocktail Lounge, but they investigated. Did anybody know her? Had anybody ever seen her there? No. That is one answer. And as I said, and I don't want to waste too much time on Steve Hodel. I could talk about him all day, but he will tell you there was no lost week. That she was reported in the newspapers as being in a bar on Main Street, here, there, everywhere. And the reality is that the cops read the newspapers. They investigated sightings that people don't even know about. Okay. They checked out tons and tons and tons of sightings. None were ever established to be Elizabeth Short. So probably, she might probably went out on Olive. What we do know is that her luggage was at the bus station. And when Red Manley dropped her off, he said, "Stay out of this neighborhood. It's a bad neighborhood." Did she go back to the bus station? When he left her, when Red Manley left her at the bus station, he said, "Well, she was really indefinite. She just wanted me to leave her at the bus station, and I didn't want to do that because it's in a bad neighborhood." That's probably accurate. It's for sure in a bad neighborhood. It's on Skid Row. Did she go back there? We don't know. There were certainly bus service. The streetcars used to shut down at a certain hour, but the bus service, which they called the Owl service, that went kind of all night. She could have hopped a bus somewhere. She could have gone to an all-night movie theater in downtown Los Angeles. At a certain point, you can only speculate. The hard truth is, we don't know. We don't know where she went. We don't know what she did. We do not know where she was from the time Red Manley left her at the Biltmore until she turned up dead. Now, that was on the 9th. She was killed on the 15th. It took a couple days to identify her. It took a couple days more to identify Red Manley. I think he was interviewed maybe about the 20th, which is the first time they really established a connection between her and the Biltmore. Well, they went back to and interviewed the staff at the Biltmore. And you have to wonder whether just interviewing them, do you remember this woman? Oh yeah, I remember her. And when Harry Hansen talks to the grand testifies before the grand jury, he will say, "Well, you know how it is. I think I saw her. Yes, I'm pretty sure I saw her." He was very skeptical of whether the staff at the Biltmore even noticed her. You will. Oh, you're back. Okay. That's twice for mint chocolate. Okay. So you'll say, well, um, uh, I think I saw her. I'm pretty sure. Now, when you read the LAPD summary, um, you will see the name listed. Harold, I think his name's Harold Studholm, who is the bell captain. They saw her and they thought they saw her going to the payphones and making calls and all that sort of thing. They never nailed down any of that. When they police interviewed Red Manley, they asked, "Did you see her make any phone calls?" No. Did she make any phone calls from San Diego? I didn't see her make any phone calls. Okay. When you were driving up from San Diego and you were making your business calls, did she make any phone calls? Well, she might have. I don't know. She was sitting in the car while I was making my sales calls. She might have made, but she didn't talk about that. Mark Hansen said that. Mark Hansen said, nope. She called me from San Diego. She wanted to come back. I told her no, not until Anne Toth came back. Anne Toth was up in the Bay Area for the holidays. No, not until Anne Toth comes back, and maybe not even then. So that was, we really don't know. And it's a hard thing for people to accept. We don't know. It's just, people want like a bad answer better than none. Oh, Vince, Vince, I don't know. Is that in Knowlton's book? It's been a long time since I read it. Yeah, no, it was not virtually solved. No, Aggie Underwood had no idea, and I think Joan, if you're still here, I don't think Aggie ever thought that she knew. You might get that from Gilmore. John Gilmore loved to make up things about what people knew. So that is, we don't know. I mean, the short answer is we don't know where she went from the Biltmore. It is based on what I know. She was off the grid for a certain amount of time, where she was someplace where she could not obtain certain things. So let's see. Let me scroll back. Yeah, Captain Knowlton, how's the book going along? Great. I just finished part 1. What did I say? 135,000 words. Thank you for asking. Eugene, one theory is that Elizabeth Short was killed at the Astor Motel. No, absolutely not. They investigated the heck out of the Astor Motel. No. And, that came out. There's a lot about the Astor Motel in Boxey, and there's just nothing to it. I mean, the short answer is there's no point in wasting time on it. Okay. Elena asks, do you know what Mark Hansen did? Yeah, we are discussing the. Do you know what Mark Hansen did to get on Anne Toth's bad side? According to Mark Shostrom, Anne Toth never stopped believing that Mark Hansen played a role in Elizabeth Short's death, though she doubted that Hansen himself committed the murder, saying that he was too chicken shit. Toth seems to have had some sort of arrangement with Hansen, even though she had a boyfriend, Leo, at the time. Well, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. Okay. Who is Anne Toth? Who is Mark Hansen? And how do they fit into the Black Dahlia case? Okay. Mark Hansen has a house just off Hollywood Boulevard. I'm trying to remember what the cross street is. I think it's Gower. I think it's Gower. I can't remember. I wrote it. Anyway, Mark Hansen had a house a block off Hollywood Boulevard. And he was involved in the Markel movie theater, which was an independent movie theater that ran second run films. And he was involved with the Florentine Gardens, they were very close to each other. Okay. Mark Hansen had a couple of rooms that he would loan out or whatever to various ladies who were in somewhat distressed financial circumstances. Okay. He was friends, and I don't know how, he was friends with a guy named Leo. Okay, Mark Hansen was friends with a guy named Leo, who was in the hat business. And long story short, Elizabeth Short ended up with one of his hats. And when she left the French family down in San Diego, she left one of the Leo Joseph hats with them as a thank you. Okay, so Leo is a married guy. He's having an affair with Anne Toth. He needs somewhere to park Anne Toth. So he says to his buddy Mark Hansen, hey, I've got this girl on the side. Can she stay at your place? Sure. And so Anne Toth is an aspiring actress. She does bit parts. She's got a little Hollywood career and that kind of thing. And so for various and sundry reasons, Elizabeth Short meets Mark Hansen. He lets Elizabeth Short and her sidekick, Margie Graham, stay. Anyway, the relationship, Mark Shostrom was very generous with his research, like about in 2001. I haven't talked to Mark in a long, long time, but he did share his research with me. And he interviewed Anne Toth many, many years after the fact. And he was very generous and he shared that interview with me. Boxy has 2 interviews with Anne Toth in here. And so I tend, because they were more contemporaneous with the killing, I tend to stress them more than what she said many years later. Although I will say Anne Toth repeated in many cases, almost word for word, what's in Boxy in many cases. She did tell Mark Shostrom, at least that's what Mark told me, that she thought Mark Hansen was too chicken shit to ever kill anybody. That's probably true. Mark Hansen was predatory in the sense that he would take advantages of these young ladies who had come to Los Angeles, come to Hollywood, hoping for a career, didn't have money, needed a place to stay. And yeah, you can stay with me, but he expected sex. And, Anne Toth says in here, if the ladies didn't come across, he threw them out. So he was predatory. And I should mention that Mark Hansen managed to get himself shot by a lady who then, after she shot him, put on her clothes and left. I mean, you have to wonder what was going on with this guy. Anyway, there's not a lot to like about Mark Hansen. And so it wouldn't be hard to get on Anne Toth's bad side. What happened later on, I don't know. Anne Toth died way before I could ever interview her, so I don't know. But she had good reason to not like Mark Hansen. I think she told in the interview here that we're cordial. I just don't see him anymore. No, he was not. Somebody asks on Instagram, was Mark Hansen a pimp? No, he was not. It was all for him. He wasn't interested in enabling anybody else. His thing was he had a house. You want to stay, you can stay, but he expected sex, and that was kind of how he was operating. Okay, let's go back here. Okay. Femke, I heard that his tattoo was removed post-mortem, but found somewhere maybe in the body. Where was it found? I'm not going to get into that. That's one of the key questions. The answer is out there, but I am not going to get into it. Did I read anything about Ralph Asdale's suspect who was at Leimert Park? Yes, I'm the fellow who found Ralph Asdale and interviewed him for the first time in 50 years. That was me. So yes, I do know about that. Ralph was loaned to the investigation like a lot of cops were. And he did have a role in it. He did. There's a picture of him with Red Manley. They recovered, or they thought they recovered, Elizabeth Short's purse and shoes. And so they have a lineup of purse and shoes. And Ralph is the guy with the gloves holding the purse while Red Manley is sniffing it. That's Ralph. He thought he identified a subject down in South LA. I think it was around Crenshaw someplace. He passed his suspicions on to the lead detectives, Harry Hansen and Finest Brown, and they did whatever, they filed it away. He said he left the investigation because he promised Red Manley that the press was not going to show up for this lineup of shoes. And he said, well, all the reporters showed up. And so, at that point, he said, I'd had enough. I told him I wanted to go back to my regular beat. And he did. So he was loaned to the investigation. And let's see, that was that. Quick question. Where was Red Manley the day of the killing? He and his wife were playing cards with another couple. So he was nowhere to be found. Okay. John, let's see. I noticed in your FAQs in relation to the probate lawsuit around Dr. Bailey's estate, you say you interviewed his colleagues and daughters who assured that his business was never illicit. If that is the case, then what do you make of the coverage from his wife that his business partner threatened to out his business? We didn't threaten to out his business. We don't know what the secret was. We know Walter Bailey had a secret because that comes from the wife. His wife said, and it is in the lawsuit over the probate records again and again. She said that let's see, she said that Dr. Partika, his partner, had learned a secret about him, and he lived in constant fear that he would be exposed and his secret would ruin him. And so his partner would threaten that, every time he wanted to go back to his family, she wouldn't let him. So we know he had a secret. It's pretty well established that he's had a secret. What was it? I don't know. I do not know what and the people who do know or did know were all dead. So we don't know. Yeah, I just, okay, where are we here? Was Dr. Bailey living with his mistress at his medical office at the time of the murder? We don't know. We don't know. Dr. Walter Bailey used his office address for absolutely everything. Everything. His partner did that most of the time. She would list, I think, one or two other addresses. But when I asked Walter Bailey's secretary, I said, where was he living? She says, I don't know. I didn't want to know. So that is the highest authority I have, is his secretary, who said, I don't know and I don't want to know. Yeah. No, I don't. Joan, no, I don't think so. And it's you have to always wonder about the sources of those stories. Was it from John Gilmore? Total liar. Was it from Will Fowler? Total liar. I mean, the magnitude of lies surrounding the Black Dahlia case is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And so you have to be so careful where that came from. What did she really say? I don't know. Unfortunately, she is gone. Will Fowler did leave a number of interviews with her on cassette. They're out at special collections, or they were at Cal State Northridge. And they're interesting. It's a long trek out there, but I did it. And that might shed some light on it. Okay. Let's see. Bevo Means was in a Long Beach bar. Jean Marie, that's kind of mangled. Jack Smith was a rewrite guy at the Daily News. He called the druggist, and he got that. That's where he got it. Aggie Underwood in the I think it's in the interviews with Will Fowler, said she got it from the Long Beach police. I think that's what she said. Bevo was a drunk, okay? And Bevo was just sort of a standing joke among the old-time reporters. Okay. Bevo was, during Prohibition, it was near beer. Okay. It was made by Anheuser-Busch. It was near beer. And the joke was that Bevo was always near beer. Okay. That's how he got the nickname, Bevo, near beer, always. Um, he drank all the time. He was just sort of the standing joke. Um, and maybe he got it in a bar, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, that could, Joan, that could be. Let's see. Justin asked the same question. Why was Red Manley ruled out as a suspect? Um, yeah, okay. They gave him a couple of polygraphs. You have to remember that the polygraph was extremely primitive, and it's not admissible in court. Okay, it is often viewed as pseudoscience. Red Manley ultimately was questioned any number of times. They gave him this early primitive version of a polygraph. They gave him truth serum. They gave him the whole 9 yards, and he did not do it. And there's no point in wasting any more time on it. Let's see here. Illegal abortions were performed at the professional building. Yeah, allegations from who? Who is that from? That's from Steve Hodel. That's a Steve Hodel question. Steve Hodel has got a long thing about Leslie Audrain, and he goes on and on about, and I think some of that comes from Thicker and Thieves. I'm relying on my memory now. Anyway, the whole thing about Leslie Audrain is Leslie Audrain was dead. So no, he wasn't doing abortions. And the whole thing is that it's such a long, convoluted story. Okay, very quickly. Thicker and Thieves is by a self-published book, and that should raise a red flag for you, by a guy named Charles Stoker, okay, who was the sergeant during the whole Brenda Allen scandal, which is a whole different subject that I'm not going to get into. Anyway, he writes about he had this policewoman working with named Audrey, and Audrey made an appointment to see, I think it was Dr. Audrain, and Audrain didn't show up. Therefore, he was suspicious. It's like, oh, come on. The professional building was a 10-story building of medical offices. And, there is, I haven't looked at the directory of that building in a long time. It shows a lot of ignorance about, and I spent a long time researching the subject of abortion in LA. It's an interesting subject. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it now. Were abortions being performed in the professional building? No, there's nothing to show that other than people wanting it to be true. When you look at how abortions were actually done in Los Angeles, it would be on a kitchen table by some guy who maybe had a clue of what he was doing. One of the more interesting things was they would bring in a doctor to do it. They would bring in everybody. They would rent a house somewhere. They would fly in a doctor. They would fly in a nurse. They'd never work together. They would do their appointments, boom, 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 and then everybody would go. They did that. That would happen. There was a woman arrested down in Long Beach who claimed she had done thousands of abortions, mainly, I think she said it was mainly teenage girls and Navy wives, generally who already had a kid. But that, yeah, I don't really want to get too far into that. It's a whole different subject. Am I familiar with the Knowlton interview on Larry King? No, thank God. No, I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it. I've had enough of I've had enough of Janice Knowlton. She was just batty, Okay. I think you may have touched this early on your presentations. DNA evidence on items within the Black Dahlia files, letters, etc., that could be used to build out some forensic genealogy path. Okay, I get the DNA question somewhat often, so let me address it now. How does DNA work? You need to get DNA off of something that was from the killer, that the killer touched. Okay, what do we have? Not a lot. Elizabeth Short was found naked, so they didn't have her clothes. Maybe they found her shoes. Maybe they found her purse. Maybe. What they know for sure is that the one envelope with her belongings that was mailed to the papers, that was from the killer for sure. Okay. None of the rest of the stuff. All the other prank mail was prank mail. It was from every once in a while it would be somebody who legitimately thought they were trying to help, but most of it was crackpot mail. Pranking the police was a thing to do in Los Angeles for many years. Writing letters to the paper, writing letters to the cops. Yeah, that was a thing to do. The actual letter that for sure came from the killer was addressed with cutout letters cut out from the paper, and contained, and it's a little envelope, it's not very big. It contained some snapshots, birth certificate, social security card, her address book, what was left of it, and everything was damp from being soaked in solvent. So, and you have to look at, okay, so the killer was smart enough to soak everything in solvent. So he's a pretty smart guy. Now, maybe you would have, maybe the guy, I don't know, licked the stamp. Maybe the guy licked the back of the envelope to seal it. Maybe. Okay. Can you recover DNA from a stamp from the 40s? Maybe. Then you have to ask yourself, where is it? Where is this stuff? Because, and who else handled it? And when you see the pictures of the envelope with the stuff, it's all spread out. Their fingerprint guys have got it spread all over the place. So you know that, or you don't know who else has handled it. Who else? It went through the mail. The postal service guys handled it. The fingerprint technicians handled it. Maybe the big question is, where is it? Where is it now? Is it in the file cabinet? Maybe. I don't know. But I mean, the real question is the LAPD going to invest the time and the money to pursue something that is only going to be of interest to armchair sleuths? Is it going to, will it result in the arrest of anyone? Will anybody be arrested and prosecuted? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The LAPD is only interested in, and rightfully so, they're only interested in cases that are going to result in an arrest and a prosecution and a conviction. That's their job. That makes sense. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Any information on Joseph Dumais? Yeah, it's hilarious. Who's Joseph Dumais? Joseph Dumais was a guy at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and he was on guard duty. And a couple of guys went on leave, and they left their money with him for safekeeping while they went off on leave. And they came back, and guess what? The money was gone. So he gets busted for that. And so he concocts a story about how he killed the Black Dahlia and he was out in LA and that kind of thing. And you know, they questioned him. The LA cops did not question him. They had the I think it would have been the MPs, question him. The military police questioned him. And Dumais did sort of an interesting example of a subject learning from his interrogation. As he was interrogated, his answers got better and better and better. But he was eliminated. I mean, they knew from his record that he had not been in LA. But every time after that, for years, every time he got arrested for one thing or another, he would claim that he killed the Black Dahlia, and he would show up in these little, like, 2-inch stories in the paper. Oh, Dumais in the in the paper again, claiming that he's a carnival worker. He claims he killed the Black Dahlia. No, he didn't. Okay, that's the Dumais question. Let's see. Let me go over to. Okay, I'm going to skip a whole bunch of questions here. I think it's from Warren here. He said, I submitted this before and I didn't get an answer to it. And we're coming up on 5 minutes. So I need to cut this off so Instagram will save it. Otherwise not. So Warren asks, aside from Dr. Walter Bailey, do you have any other probable suspects that you would include as being potential murderers? Say in one research, most evidence points to Dr. Bailey, but were there others that you researched that had some interesting ties to Elizabeth Short and the murder that we do not know about? No. And I'll tell you why. When I started on the Black Dahlia case in 1996 and shortly thereafter, it became very clear to me, very apparent, based on Severed and based on Daddy was the Black Dahlia killer, that anybody who thought they had solved the Black Dahlia killing was out of their mind. Anybody who, and I said that for a long time, anybody who thinks they've solved the Black Dahlia case is just nuts. They haven't, it's just crazy. And so, for a long time, I thought, yeah, anybody who thinks they've solved the case is nuts. And so I was never trying to solve the case. It was just an interesting story. And in the course of doing the research, I uncovered documents because and the reason is I looked at the history of the property. And I have to thank John Douglas for pointing me at what do I know about the neighborhood, because I would not have looked at that at all. That was from him. And then from Kyle Wood sent me this material, very multi-generation photocopy that led me in that direction. But I was never about solving it. I thought people who thought they solved the murder, Black Dahlia murder, were crazy. And indeed, most of the books are crazy. Steve Hodell's books, now at Black Dahlia Avenger 4 and counting, that's crazy. What he says is crazy. What P.U. Eatwell says is crazy. It does not hold up according to what's in here. And she had to overlook a mountain of evidence to produce that book. What Don Wolfe, also from Boxy, Don Wolfe, that was a total fraud. And so, again, what, people who think they've solved the Black Dahlia case, no. Let's see. Do I have a photo of Walter Bailey after World War I? Yes, I do. I'm not willing to share it, but yes, I do have that. Okay. I need to cut it off here because otherwise, as I said, Instagram will not save the recording, and that so I'm gonna say goodbye to Instagram for now. Bye, Instagram. Okay. Let's see. Yes, end video. There we go. Okay. Okay. So I will deal with Instagram later. Yeah. So yeah, the people who think they've solved it, and I've talked to any number. I have talked to people who will come up to me and say, "Oh yeah, slam dunk, it was Mark Hansen, for sure. I know it, and here's my proof." And it's like, oh no. Or Carl Balsiger. People will grab onto Carl Balsiger and say, "Oh yeah, he for sure did it based on this murder that was just like." Well, it's not just like that. People treat the Black Dahlia case like a game of Clue. They will go through the list of suspects on Wikipedia, and I've seen it on Reddit. Oh well, I went through the list of suspects and I solved the Black Dahlia case in half an hour, and the police were inept and corrupt. And funny enough, it's always a guy who does that. I mean, to men, the Black Dahlia case is just an intellectual puzzle. That's it, to be solved with superior male brain power. And with that, I'm going to call it off. We've had enough. The next one is January 2nd. We'll do it again. And until then, have a great holiday. And we'll talk to you then. Have a good holiday. Happy New Year. See you on January 2nd, 2024. Say goodbye, Boxy.